You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
CISOs and CIOs know machine identities now outnumber humans by more than 80-1. And without securing them, trust, uptime, outages, and compliance are at risk. CyberArk is leading the way with the only unified platform purpose-built to secure every machine identity, certificates, secrets, and workloads across all environments, all clouds, and all AI agents. Designed for scale, automation, and quantum readiness, CyberArk helps modern enterprises secure their machine future. Visit cyberark.com/machines to see how. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
One of the main initial access vectors that we have been very closely tracking are web injects, which of course are injects on legitimate but compromised websites that have been observed delivering a variety of different malware. Many of those payloads do tend to be information stealers. And so in this case, we were able to see a malware that became known as Amatera stealer, or that's what we later identified it as, being delivered via web injects.
That's Selena Larson, threat researcher and lead for intelligence analysis and strategy at Proofpoint. The research we're discussing today is titled Amatera Stealer, rebranded ACR Stealer with improved evasion and sophistication.
We also saw a number of samples in open source, like on VirusTotal. Some of our colleagues at other research teams also observed it in other attack chains. But what's really interesting to me is the fact that the stealer landscape right now is so dynamic. And this particular stealer is basically a rebranded stealer known as ACR stealer. But it's got a lot of updates to it. And I think that one of the most important things from a cyber criminal perspective, especially now in the landscape, are taking a look at information stealers, taking a look at this landscape, trying to figure out, what are threat actors using? How are they, developing workarounds for defense? What are the different delivery mechanisms that we're seeing a lot of? Because, as we've talked about previously on various podcasts, Dave, the information stealer landscape right now is booming. And that's where, it's a very, very serious threat. And so this was an interesting sort of little deep dive that we were able to see about this pretty interesting information stealer.
So you mentioned ACR stealer. What set Amatera stealer apart that it's not just a variant of ACR, that it is its own unique thing?
Yeah, so there are significant portions of code overlap that exist with ACR stealer analysis in the public. And so that's kind of where we're like, oh, is this just, updated or ACR? But it's really featured a full rebrand. So Amatera stealer is actually sold as a malware as a service, which is what we see from a lot of these very prominent information stealers. Lumma, for example, was pretty much the most popular malware as a service in terms of the information stealer ecosystem, and then it got disrupted. And so that's also, we can talk about that as part of this conversation too, but that's, why we're kind of keeping an eye on how the info stealer landscape is moving. But what we did find was this particular malware had a bunch of new, interesting anti-analysis features. There was some improved sophistication of the malware. The command and control operates a lot differently. The actual where you can purchase it or manage it from, the panel. We were able to get eyes on a panel. It's called Amatera Stealer. So, you can actually see like the payment structure and the tier structure. And What was interesting is that back in July of 2024, the ACR support channel, which is of course on Telegram, as many of these things are, basically they said, we're not going to sell ACR Stealer anymore. We're closed for an indefinite period, but there will be no problems. We do not say goodbye. This is, of course, all in Russian, but we included a machine translated version of that message. But so they said, okay, this is not goodbye. And so then come around December, towards the end of last year, this new Amatera stealer sort of popped up, and the panel began surfacing. And so we were able to kind of see some of those overlaps in terms of the timeline of the stealer and the sort of the rebrand with a bunch of new features.
I see. So your belief is that this is the same group who created ACR Stealer. This is an updated version. Okay.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it. So the research talks about how Amatera is distributed via ClearFake campaigns and also these ClickFix techniques. For anyone in our audience who might not be familiar with ClickFix, can you give us a quick description of how that works?
Yeah, of course. And I do, I have to say, I recognize that it's very tough to keep a full understanding of the threat landscape. We're saying things like ClearFake and ClickFix, and we talk about this technique called ether hiding and all these things.
Right.
And certainly ClearFake is just one of many types of web inject campaigns. So, I just want to say that if you're wondering, what is ClearFake? I've never heard of this before. You know what? That is totally fine because
don't let your imposter syndrome kick in because it's not you.
No, it's the landscape. It's
Right.
so crazy right now. Like the amount of web inject campaigns that we're seeing, many of which use the ClickFix technique, which I'll describe in just a second.
Yeah.
So there's so many out there. So ClickFix is actually a really interesting social engineering technique whereby threat actors will either through web injects or direct URLs or in some way essentially show you this dialogue that says you need to update for security purposes, or you need to solve this CAPTCHA in order to actually access this content. And what that basically does is it tricks into copying, pasting, and running PowerShell on their own host. So what we saw, for example, with this ClearFake campaign, and again, ClearFake is a type of web inject campaign, that when they go to a website that's compromised by ClearFake injects, they were presented with this fake CAPTCHA. So it says, complete these verification steps to prove you're not a robot. And then the instructions that it actually gives you are numbered 1, 2, and 3. 1 is press and hold the Windows key plus R. And then in the verification window, press Control V and then press Enter. So it's literally this step by step. This is how to do this. But ultimately, what it is you're running a ClickFix PowerShell command. So it's ClickFix. The technique is this click to fix, basically copying, pasting, and running PowerShell. And this is something that we've seen from just tons of actors. It's completely overtaken the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems like it is the flavor of the month right now, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we've even seen it with espionage threat actors using this sort of ClickFix technique. We see a lot of different sort of styles of the ClickFix technique. We see it with just, of course, update your Chrome browser. Of course, we see it with that. We see the CAPTCHA, prove you're not a robot. But we've even seen it with like very specific and customized software that, a specific target might be using for transportation and logistics, for instance, and it'll be like, oh, you have to update this very specific software. So threat actors are taking this idea of the ClickFix technique to, copy, paste, and run PowerShell on a host, and just, making it unique for whatever their purposes are. And I think that is one interesting part of this whole story. Actually, is this ClickFix technique just one exploding all across the landscape, where you have these web inject threat actors like ClearFake, Land Update. A lot of the other threat actors that we're trying, ZPHP, a lot of these different clusters are using these sort of like fake web inject style things compared with ClickFix. We see it with email actors as well, distributing URLs in ClickFix. It's just everywhere. It's like that meme. It's like ClickFix everywhere. You used to see it, the Toy Story meme. It's like it's everywhere.
Right. Which we assume means that they're seeing great success with it.
That is how I am interpreting this. I mean, yeah, the thing is typically when you see an explosion of a technique proliferate like this across the landscape, it tends to be very effective. I mean, we're not going to see all of these actors using the same technique if it's not working.
Yeah.
Which is what actually kind of, it kind of freaks me out. And they're well-designed wars too. Like I have to say, like they're very it's a believable CAPTCHA. If you don't really know, the steps that you're taking or whatever, it is pretty believable.
So earlier in our conversation, you alluded to this technique called ether hiding.
Mhm.
Can you unpack that one for us?
So ether hiding is kind of interesting. Basically, it uses something called the Binance smart contract that has this JavaScript is stored in that smart contract. And then that is what will kind of generate the CAPTCHA and the malicious command on the actual host. And what the actor can do is like modify the smart contract instead of like the inject itself, basically. And it kind of has like it's kind of complicated, and it's
Yeah.
really just like the ClearFake cluster is one of the only ones that is that we see regularly kind of adopting this ether hiding technique. But it's essentially using the blockchain to store this command in a way that they can, update that when they need to. And then oftentimes they might just leave it and not modify it at all. So it's kind of yeah, it's basically you can block the domain on which the script is actually hosted, which is like the actual smart contract. And that is kind of what the threat actor is using, as opposed to injecting the JavaScript directly on the website, for example. There's a lot of different techniques that web inject threat actors use, and ether hiding is one of them that we see with ClearFake.
We'll be right back. Krogel is AI built for the enterprise SOC, fully private, schema-free, and capable of running in sensitive, air-gapped environments. Krogel autonomously investigates thousands of alerts weekly, correlating insights across your tools without data leaving your perimeter. Designed for high availability across geographies, it delivers context-aware, auditable decisions aligned to your workflows. Krogel empowers analysts to act faster and focus on critical threats, replacing repetitive triage with intelligent automation to help your SOC operate at scale with precision and control. Learn more at Krogel.com. That's CROGL.com. And now, a word from our sponsor, ThreatLocker, the powerful zero-trust enterprise solution that stops ransomware in its tracks. Allow Listing is a deny-by-default software that makes application control simple and fast. Ring fencing is an application containment strategy, ensuring apps can only access the files, registry keys, network resources, and other applications they truly need to function. Shut out cybercriminals with world-class endpoint protection from ThreatLocker. So what are Amatera's goals once it lands on a victim's machine? What sort of data is it looking to steal?
Yeah, so as you might imagine, Steelers nowadays just have a lot of different capabilities. Of course, they're going after passwords, they're going after crypto wallets, stealing files on disks, browser cookies, web forms, things like that. And then, of course, you have Amatera Stealer that is also capable of running secondary payloads. So it could potentially download and execute files like executables, or you can download and execute PowerShell. So it has both the stealing functionality as well as the ability to run follow-on payloads.
Is the malware's configuration static, or does it have the ability to dynamically adapt?
So what's actually interesting is it used to use command and control using Steam or Telegram dead drops, which we see on a lot of times with various Stealers. We actually covered it before in one of our blog posts with VDAR Stealer, for example, where they will regularly use Steam or Telegram for command and control. But in this case, they actually started using NT sockets for command and control. And so this kind of increases the stealthiness of the C2 communication. So the way that the command and control is set up, it kind of bypasses commonly used Windows networking APIs, which a lot of times your endpoint detection analysis tool will rely on for visibility into the HTTP request. Another thing that's kind of interesting in terms of the malware capability is not using DNS. So it will use C2 via IP address. And the IP address in the cases that we were looking at was not owned by a threat actor, but was using a CDN endpoint address. In this case, it was Cloudflare. So it has a little bit of interesting C2 communications that make it a little bit tricky. So, for example, if they're using an IP address that's associated to a public CDN like Cloudflare, security operations might be reluctant to just block the IP address by default, right? It's not like you can just block a C2 domain that we often see using like malware, command and control for malware. But with an IP that belongs to this like public CDN that's probably used by a lot of different things, it might be like, okay, we might not block this because it could be used by legitimate websites that are also using CDN. In addition to that, not using a domain name or DNS through for C2 also means that it can't be blocked or alerted on through DNS monitoring. So there's no DNS lookup for the domain name. So there's some of these other sort of like C2 functionalities that are trying to evade detection in a way that previous examples of similar malware you don't necessarily see.
Hmm. Well, we mentioned Lumma Stealer earlier. When we're looking at the landscape here, Lumma Stealer was disrupted. Do we think that Amatera is stepping in to fill that gap?
So I feel like it's a little bit early to say yes or no, but I do want to point out in terms of the actual pricing structure with Amatera and how, because of these mass, which is such a funny word, malware as a service, mass offerings, the way that they work, right, is that you pay to be able to access and use the information stealer. Lumma was very similar. And it's actually like not too expensive. So for 3 months for $500 or like a full year for $1,500, like this is what the pricing information for the publicly accessible panel we were able to see. And so, I think that first of all, having a mass offering can sometimes lower the barrier to entry for a lot of cyber criminals. But also it does sort of enter the scene at this moment where people might be leaving Lumma Stealer for a variety of reasons. Lumma isn't fully eradicated, right? Like it was, a lot of the infrastructure was disrupted. It was obviously a big win for law enforcement and the private sector. But we're still seeing some Lumma activity even after the takedown. Certainly not what it was. But what's great about a lot of these disruptions, in addition to actually disrupting infrastructure, doing takedowns, all of that stuff, is it really makes it so that the criminal who's operating this doesn't have the same sort of trust and brand recognition and like authority in the marketplace, right? And so what you often see is when these things happen is you'll have the criminals who are using whatever the malware is go to greener pastures, so to speak. Maybe malware that isn't quite so under the microscope. Maybe they try and build their own thing. Maybe they stop doing crime, which is the ideal outcome.
Yeah, what an adorable thought.
I know. In a perfect world, if you're
Right.
if like a criminal is doing crime and then the tool that they're using gets is like busted and targeted by law enforcement.
Right.
Like imagine if they decide to change their
Yes,
behavior and
time
just
for me
leave the
to
game.
step back and rethink my life.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, okay. Maybe I can go in a different direction here.
Yeah.
So I think, the market is now, I think, a little bit more open for some of these people who are like, okay, do I not trust Lumma Stealer anymore because it was a target of law enforcement disruption? Should I be spending money elsewhere? And, if I was a malware author marketing my, malware as a service, I'd be like, hey, I'm not that guy.
Right.
I don't have, law enforcement breathing down my neck with all of these, big blogs and reporting coming out about how I operate and all these things that have been taken down and, made my life a little bit challenging. I think it is an opportunity for cyber criminals to find, okay, what's next? But that's why it's so important to really be sort of monitoring on top of the information stealer landscape, because certainly Lumma was big and popular, but it's not the only one. And certainly what we're seeing, certainly with Amatera Stealer, for example, is it's under active development. So, we're seeing them continuously modifying, updating, making changes to this malware to make it, from their perspective, better, more effective, more useful for the cyber criminal operators. And of course, we wrote a bunch of detections for it. We have coverage for it, published some rules associated with it. But it's very important to sort of stay on top of these things because they are under active development. And at any point, something like the Lumma disruption could happen and everyone flocks to something else. So
Right.
I do think it's still too early to say for sure, like this is definitely replacing Lumma Stealer. But, having other options on the market and making sure that we have detections and defense against it is super important.
So what's your recommendation then for defenders? How should a security team go about protecting themselves against this?
Yeah. So, first of all, make sure you have existing network signatures that will detect this traffic and the command and control, check-in and exfiltration, the traffic, things like that. There are rules that we published that are associated with this. One thing that I really, really want to make sure to hammer home is that people are aware and incorporate ClickFix technique into their existing security training. Making sure that people are aware of the new types of social engineering and techniques that are being used by threat actors is very, very important. Also, restricting your average user from running unauthorized PowerShell is really important here. Because like literally copy pasting running PowerShell is like they're infecting themselves, and making it so that end users can't do that is something that is very important. And yeah, I think those are kind of the two main things is to make sure that you're aware that this is happening and doing, practicing defense in depth and making it so that users can't, be running PowerShell. There are other ways that we've seen Amatera delivered as well. So, things like SEO poisoning, fake software downloads, things like that. So that's also very, very important. Restricting downloads from unknown domains, unrecognized domains, really, block traffic, especially from like newer, just registered domains, things like that are impersonating enterprise software, for example, and also not downloading unauthorized software. So oftentimes you'll see a lot of information stealers will be masquerading as, for example, a VPN app or a PDF reader or a document reader, things like that. And so, restricting those the downloads from those types of tooling and only authorized, like making sure if you need something like a PDF reader, go to your IT department and ask for that. Is I think important to note here as well. So user education, I think, is really important and really big, but also making sure that you as an organization have defense in depth. And if a user does take an unsafe action, then they're blocked from the subsequent actions that could happen as a result of that activity.
Our thanks to Selena Larson from Proofpoint for joining us. The research is titled Amatera Stealer, rebranded ACR Stealer with improved evasion and sophistication. We'll have a link in the show notes. And that's Research Saturday, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to hear from you. We're conducting our annual survey to learn more about our listeners. We're collecting your insights through the end of this summer. There's a link in the show notes. Please do check it out. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Eiben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time.